Welcome to the Mentium Matters podcast, where we talk about leadership, life, and the transformative power of mentoring. I'm Solveig Brown, and today I am so excited to have Krista Claude as my guest. If you identify as more of an introvert, or sometimes just have a hard time speaking up, or if you are mentoring someone who is introverted, then this episode is for you. Krista is going to share a process that she has developed for learning to speak up more effectively and for coaching people to speak up more, even if it's not in their comfort zone to do so. Krista has developed this process based on her own experiences and her experience with coaching and mentoring others. Before we dig in, I'd like to tell you more about Krista. Krista Claude's mission is to help leaders and aspiring leaders achieve their goals and dreams. She does this through her work as an executive coach and consultant with Go Forward, a consulting firm that she started in 2014. Prior to starting her consulting business, Krista was a corporate executive with Thomson Reuters for over 26 years. She had a number of roles ranging from software engineer to senior vice president and head of technology for a variety of divisions within the company. Krista led over 1,000 software engineers who were responsible for the software development, support, and operations of a variety of products, systems, and applications. Krista is a former mentee who decided to pay it forward by mentoring others. She mentored employees throughout her career at Thomson Reuters and has been mentoring with Mentium since 2016. Welcome, Krista. I am so happy to have you as a guest today.
I am very excited to be here. As you know, this is a topic I'm passionate about.
I know. And I am so happy you're going to share this with the Mentium audience. Krista, can you tell me more about your background and how you developed this process for working with introverts, or kind of the reason behind why you felt you had to do something?
Sure. So as Solveig mentioned, I started as a software engineer. So my degrees actually are in software engineering, English, and women's studies. And I spent almost 30 years in corporate technology and left at the age of 50, 10 years ago now, and started my own consulting business called Go Forward. When I started as a software engineer, I never would have imagined that I was going to end up on a management track. I think just about every kind of survey I've taken, I register as a pretty strong introvert. So introvert software engineer starting out of college. And I kind of fell into, or I would say maybe more was pushed into the management track. And I'm so glad I was, because I loved the management track. But what happened was, when I came on board as a software engineer, the company was hiring so many software engineers so quickly that anybody who came in, got trained in, could show others how to do it, was pushed into supervisory roles pretty quickly. I mean, not even a year in, and I was showing people how to come in and enter the company and ended up in management roles. And it's something that I really, really loved, but it has challenges. I don't think you find too many people on the management path who are as strong introverts as I was. My goal in the management path was to try to achieve wins for the business and wins for the employees at the same time. And I had a strong belief that that was very possible, very doable, and would result in greater wins for the business and the projects and greater wins for employees. So as an introvert, as I went up the management track, I started by just leveraging pretty strong one-on-one communication skills that I think a lot of introverts have, and leveraging strong relationships with my direct reports, and leveraging one-on-one relationships within the business teams that our technology teams were doing work for. And that worked. That worked for a while. But then when I got to about the director level, I realized that probably wasn't going to carry me forward if I wanted to continue to grow in the challenges that I had and grow in the influence that I had at the company. I was going to need to figure out a way that was comfortable for me. Well, maybe not comfortable, but was doable for me within who I was, right? Was genuine for me in terms of how to find my voice, how to use my voice more. And that was important because I wanted to continue to get new challenges, but also because I realized that without me finding my voice, I was not supporting and advocating for my teams and the things that my teams did, and the people in my teams just were not getting the recognition they deserved. So I worked with a coach who helped me and found ways to find my voice, speak up in more settings, and started to, find how to do that. Then when I left the corporate world and I started working in my coaching business, so with coaching clients and also continuing to work with Mentium and mentoring others, I kept building on that and working with others who I found felt the same way and were introverts and wanted to find their voices and knew if they didn't, they were going to face some kind of block. And I would use their feedback and just figured out, I think it's pretty simple, just some simple steps that I've repeated several times with others that has helped them to find their voice, even as strong introverts or medium introverts.
Totally. Your story aligns so well with so many of the mentees that I've interviewed who identify as being an introvert and they are looking for ways to find their voice. So, when you are mentoring or coaching someone who is more introverted in nature and one of their goals is to be able to speak up more, what is your first step in working with them?
Yeah, I found that a crucial place to start, and I just stumbled into this, I think, but a crucial place to start is just to acknowledge and validate how hard it is for an introvert to change how they engage with others. I say a lot to others who are introverts, I've been there and the struggle is real. This isn't just about, oh, get some courage and speak up. Introverts operate in a different way, but it's possible, right? It's possible to be genuine. I found a way. It's possible to be an introvert and also make some changes to how you communicate to get the things that you want in a targeted way. So it's not just more about like just find the courage and speak up in more settings. Just be a small talk kind of person. That's just not how we are as introverts. And I know I'm biased because I'm an introvert, but there are so many great things about introverts and so much that introverts have to contribute. I mean, we love to learn. We're very good listeners. We're also really good observers. And, our brains are always going, right? We're always processing information. We're thinking about what solutions to challenges could be. And we do communicate. When we communicate, we want to communicate and engage in a meaningful discussion. We don't want to just speak if there's not a reason to be speaking, just to take up air, because we value the silence too. We value listening. So we don't want to take up space that others are taking to speak to us. And it's hard and it's uncomfortable for us to operate differently, but there's real big benefits to that. I remember once in my corporate career, kind of when I was in mid-career, and I had a sponsor, probably the strongest sponsor I'd ever had at work. I mean, he was just always had my back. He was always advocating for me. It was a great to have as a sponsor, but I also would call him an off the chart sort of extrovert, although that was my impression and I'm an off the chart introvert. So you got to keep that in mind. But he came to me and said, Krista, I'm really trying to advocate for you. I believe you can do good things. I want you to get more opportunities. But when I'm talking to the senior executives, they say, I'm just not personally comfortable with Krista. I mean, I see she does good work, but I'm not personally comfortable. So he said, you need to get out there more. You need to, get to know the senior executives. And his advice to me at that point was I should go to a networking activity where the CEO of the company was there, and I should just go make small talk with him. And I could just sort of feel my mouth drop and my eyes open. It was like, oh, this is just not something I could do. And I said, well, what would I talk to him about? And he said, well, he likes motorcycles. So maybe you
Oh
could
my
talk to
gosh.
him about motorcycles. And so I'm kind of viewing myself as, oh yeah, I'm going to go to a networking event. I'm going to go up and make small talk to somebody and just chat about motorcycles. And, bless him, he had my best interests at heart. But I think a lot of people who are extroverted just don't understand the challenges for introverts. I found other ways. The point was taken. I needed to make sure others were comfortable. but I could find ways to do that in a way that was genuine and comfortable for me. So I think the first step is to just say, yeah, this is a real struggle. This isn't a small thing. It will take some effort, but it will be worth it, and you can accomplish what you want to accomplish without giving up who you are. Kind of do it in a genuine way. And when I say that to people, sometimes there's just silence on the other end of the line. I'm like, "Hello, are you there?" And they're like, "Oh, I'm so grateful to hear that." Some people are almost moved to tears. It was like, "Oh, somebody knows, somebody understands." And so I just think that's a really important place to start.
Krista, thanks for acknowledging, first of all, the strengths and skills that introverts have to offer. We live in such an extroverted world, so sometimes those are not acknowledged as being incredibly important. And I also love that feeling of the relief that people have of feeling that there is a way to move forward and just the acknowledgement that it is hard. So, once you've acknowledged to someone that it is hard as an introvert, but it is possible and doable, what is the second step?
Yeah, so the next step I always go for is to identify, why do you want to speak up? I mean, this is a hard thing for introverts to do, to speak up. And if there's not a good reason why, you're going to have a hard time making it happen. It's not really enough of a reason just to say, because I think I should be speaking up more, or because someone else says I should be speaking up more. I try to just ask some questions and work with people to figure out, well, let's go a little deeper than that, right? Let's think about, what do you think you're missing? What might not happen if you don't speak up? And specifically, what would you be happy to accomplish by speaking up? And some of the things that come up are things like, well, kind of like my reason, right, was I feeling a little stuck in my career. I feel like there's not opportunities there because people aren't personally comfortable with me or know enough about me and my teams. That's a reason. Another reason is I want to advocate for the teams I'm managing, and I want to make sure they get recognition and get resources. And if I'm not speaking up, then they may not get that. Other reasons are, particularly for independent contributors, that they want to collaborate more. They really love the experience of co-creating solutions, working together and feel like if they were speaking up more, then they would have more people collaborating with them. I've had people say they just want to feel less lonely at work or in social situations. So those are all the kinds of reasons. You want to get specific to a reason that means something to you. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it needs to mean something to you that is important enough that you will figure out how to do something that's very uncomfortable. And the other thing that I bring up, it's usually not a reason that others think about off the top of their head, but I think it's really important. It was an aha moment for me when I realized that when I'm in a meeting and I don't speak up, I'm letting others assume things about me. So I had an unwritten rule, and you'd be surprised how many introverts I talk to that say, "Oh yeah, I have this unwritten rule. I'm in a group meeting, right? And I will definitely speak up if someone doesn't put this good idea that's in my head on the table, or if there's a risk that someone else isn't pointing out." So in other words, if I see something missing, I will speak up. Otherwise, I'm just going to be quiet, because what value would I add, right, by speaking up if something's already been put out there in the meeting? And a lot of people have that rule. But then I realized that if I'm being quiet, then I'm letting others hold any unconscious biases they might have about me as their truth. So, everyone has unconscious biases. We're humans. We make judgments about people all the time. We try to catch ourselves and make sure that that's not unfair, but everybody has unconscious biases. And I felt that because I was a woman in technology. So 30 years ago, being a woman in technology and computer science, I was a minority. As I got into the executive ranks, I was a woman in corporate executive ranks and was a minority. And what I realized is, if I'm sitting in a meeting and I'm not saying anything, whatever that other person holds about me as an assumption or an unconscious bias, I'm letting them hold that assumption. I'm not giving them any reason not to think that about me. So that was pretty compelling to me. That's, to me, a reason that I should at least say something, whether it's agreeing with someone's idea or whatever it might be. If I'm silent, I let that bias hold. And I always throw that out there to see if that's something that resonates with others, which it usually does. And it kind of becomes another reason why at this step that you might identify that it's worth it to speak up.
Oh, totally. And I love that you help people find a why that is motivational enough to do the work of moving out of your comfort zone. And your example of not wanting to contribute to other people's unconscious bias is incredibly powerful. So, after someone has figured out their why, what is the next step?
So the next step is to put it into action, right? You know why you want to speak up. So you have one or two reasons that you want to speak up. And what you want to do next is just identify specific situations where you are going to do something you wouldn't otherwise do. So you are going to speak up in a situation you probably otherwise wouldn't. And you want to target those situations to your goals. You know what you want to accomplish, you know the why, you look for situations where it's going to help me start meeting that goal if I speak up in this situation. You also want to start small. This is one of those things that you start small, and trust me, it'll grow fast. Small things will make an impact, but also you'll start getting more comfortable and you'll start doing bigger and bigger things. But in the beginning, you just start small and keep it brief. So we want to make it as easy as possible since it is an uncomfortable thing to do. And highly recommend that you also script all a part of what you're going to say. So you're nervous enough as it is, you're going into this setting, you're going to say something. It's really helpful if you have that something or part of that something memorized. I call that sort of a starter script to help you make that next step. So thinking of some examples, let's say that you're someone who wants to collaborate more or wants to feel less lonely at work, and you're someone who's good with one-on-one conversations, but as soon as it gets to two or more people, not so much. You generally don't join in. So you could plan for, make it time bound, right? Time bound is good. Sometime within the next week, if I'm seeing two of my colleagues talking, I'm going to walk up and join them. And then at a break in the conversation, I'm going to insert a pre-planned question for them. So it could be, what did you think of that company announcement that just came out last week? Or it could be something else, but sort of pre-plan a question. And if you can, once they respond, provide a statement back to them, react to their comment. That's it. That's the situation that you're going to do. Or let's say you're someone who maybe has a goal that you feel stuck, you want to expand your influence, you want people to see you as more of a leader. So you might plan a situation where the next time you're in one on one with your boss, you are going to make sure to insert a statement that is vision based. So that might be something where you start by saying, well, my vision for how this project should go forward is, and then just fill in the blank. Or you could have a statement that says, I'd love to see us get to the point where we operate like this, something future oriented, where you plan at least the first part of the sentence and you say that sentence. So that's the next step, is like make it time bound. Say in the next 1 or 2 weeks, I'm going to do this one specific thing. I'm going to script it so that when I get nervous and I open my mouth, I know what's going to come out to get me started. And then if you can, in that moment, also remember how it feels. Remember any reactions that you get from others in terms of how maybe something different happened that might have happened before. Maybe someone stops you and chats with you that wouldn't have before that you were talking with. Maybe your boss starts having more of a long-term vision conversation with you, and that might not have happened. So try to be in the moment and recognize and think about those things as well. that sounds like a lot, but making it as simple as possible and small and directed for the first step.
These are great examples of small steps with starter scripts that make it seem doable. So once someone feels more comfortable doing these smaller steps with the starter scripts, what's next for them? What would be, your next step?
Right. So after you've done that, then you want to take some time and debrief it with yourself. And it's so helpful if you can do all of these steps with someone else, but particularly this step. So if you're a mentee and some of this resonates with you, ask your mentor to talk each step through with your mentor. Talk about what the whys are, talk about what your situation is, commit to them. You'll do that one thing before your next meeting. And then in this step, right, you would be debriefing with them. So think about how it felt once you got started. How did it go? Is there anything that you might have done differently? Did you notice any outcomes from it? Did you notice that someone engaged with you and you ended up getting into a meaningful conversation that meant something to you? Did you notice that the conversation continued but went in a different way? Did you notice that one of those people you were talking with stopped and talked to you again later or approached you about something? Just notice any outcomes that might be helping you to achieve your goal. And then in that debrief, you also should just congratulate yourself for doing it. It's always important to it doesn't matter how small it was a first step. And so you want to do that and debrief. And then in the process of debrief, you're going to start thinking about what am I going to do next?
I love that. I love that reflection piece and congratulating yourself by acknowledging that what you've done is really hard. And it seems like that the reactions you get from people probably help grow the motivation to keep doing it and to figure out what is next. So then what would be that final anchoring step of how to make it like a habit?
Right. So I don't know if really strong introverts ever get to it being a habit per
Mhm.
se, but it gets easier. It gets a lot easier. And you'll find that maybe after you do this once or twice, like if you're walking up to a group of two people and you have it scripted, you'll find by maybe the third or fourth time you don't need to script it. You're more comfortable with it. When you've gotten positive reactions to what you're doing and it's ended up in a meaningful conversation or an additional interaction with someone, which is really, really important to introverts, you'll see that something positive has come out of the little bit, well, sometimes a lot of discomfort that you have for starting the conversation. And then even though it's uncomfortable, you'll kind of crave the outcome, so to speak. And so you will know that it's worth it. It's worth it to take the next step. So the small things that you're doing will become more normal anyway. It will become easier and you'll want to do it because you're seeing the outcomes that you can get from it. And then you basically just keep repeating all these steps. You'll find everyone I've worked with on this has found that once they start doing it, there's outcomes they didn't imagine that are positive that they can add to their list of reasons why. Things will happen because you're genuinely communicating and that will lead to opportunities, that will lead to more conversations, that will lead to people bringing ideas to you, that will lead to people ask their opinion of things, that will lead to people asking you for help, that may lead to people offering you resources, thinking of you for a certain project. And so that gets added to your list of whys, of why this is important to do. And then when you think of what's the next thing I want to push myself to do, in finding my voice and finding where it's important to apply my voice, those things will gradually get bigger. And your outcomes and your whys will get bigger, but it will still be genuine to you and it still will be targeted towards what you want to achieve. So basically at this point you just sort of rinse and repeat, right? You go back and you check in on your whys. Why do you want to do it? What might you do differently from what you learned before? What's the next thing I'm going to take on? Time bound it. I'm going to do it within the next couple of weeks. Script however much of it that you need to script. do it and reflect, and you keep repeating and it grows and grows.
Krista, I love this whole process. I like the acknowledgement too that it never necessarily gets comfortable. It never is like second nature. However, the responses or the new opportunities that arrive because of it make it so that people will continue to do that, to continue to keep finding their whys and to keep pushing forward. And the snowball effect that it has in your career sounds quite amazing. What have you observed doing this process with yourself and in mentoring and coaching others through the process? You've talked about some of these really positive effects, but how have people felt, or what has it been like for them to be able to do something, thinking about where they started at the beginning, where it was just so hard to speak up, and then all the benefits that have arrived from learning to speak up in small steps?
Yeah, yeah, it's been quite amazing. In terms of things that can be achieved, certainly I had my own story to think about. So I knew that in the middle of my career, me finding a targeted way to use my voice was a big part of me continuing to get opportunities and continuing to be able to grow in my career. So I knew, relatively big things are possible. But man, when I started working with clients and mentees on this and the amount that they have achieved and how much it has snowballed has just been inspirational for me. It's a joy. It is just a joy to work with people on this. And I think part of the reason that it snowballs is because as introverts, we do like to talk about things and we do like to have meaningful one-on-one conversations with people. So in our own way, we like to communicate. And in this process, I'm encouraging people to communicate in an authentic way. So you're being authentic, you're being genuine, you're going for those follow-up outcomes, and people start to get more of a glimpse of who you are, what you know, the skills that you have, and that causes things to snowball. So sometimes what happens, I've seen happen is as people have done this more, those there's people around them that realize, wow, this person has a lot of expertise and institutional knowledge. They really observe what's going on around them. They've thought about how they'd like things to function. They've, taken everything in. So as others see glimpses of that and they realize that, clients and mentees of mine have been asked to take over like training sessions, which they love. They'd love to do the training sessions or to consult on projects or to take on new projects. So those have been some amazing outcomes. Or for people who have been working more on breaking into being seen as a leader, they've had opportunities open up and seen expanded responsibilities, even, promotions to the next level. That's some of the outcomes that I've seen. And I've also seen a lot of things happen on the sort of social or non-work side where people carry this into some other social settings too. They maybe are going to a school function where they normally wouldn't interact much with other parents, but they start interacting more with parents and they get more involved with people outside of work. I know in one situation, someone was interacting at a school function and struck up a conversation with a parent and then talked to them again and learned about a nonprofit that it was in an area that they were really passionate about. And then in the end, they ended up being invited to be on the board of the nonprofit. That's kind of where it went to. And then there's also just that you form generally stronger relationships. And that's just impactful in and of itself, the ability to collaborate and to work with others. So those are some of the inspirational things that I've seen happen.
Krista, this is inspirational. I have the biggest smile right now because I can see the power of this. I can feel the relief that people feel, and also how I can start using some of these steps in my own life to get out of my comfort zone in certain areas. So this has been so incredibly helpful. I could talk to you all day because it is truly inspiring to hear all these stories. We have time for one final question. Krista, what would your advice be to aspiring leaders?
Yeah, I think I'm going to pull from a general thing from me but I think it's particularly applicable to this topic, right? So when I formed my coaching business, I decided to name it Go Forward. It's just 2 words, but those words are very meaningful to me. And so it's advice that I would offer is go forward. And that the forward part, it shows direction. And forward is really important. That's the why. And you should always check in with yourself every once in a while and say, okay, what's the most important why? Which direction would I hope to go? And the go, that's that's an action verb, right? It's go. So that is just do it. Just within a next period of time, go. Do something small in the direction that you want to go forward. And actually, the go forward was at least partially inspired, believe it or not, by the Dr. Seuss book, Oh, the Places You'll Go,
Oh,
which I
yeah.
have right here on my desk because
Right.
Oh, the Places You'll Go. And if you haven't read it recently, I encourage you to get it and pull it out because throughout it's a great book. But to wrap up, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a very small portion of Oh, the Places You'll Go by Dr. Seuss, which is this. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose.
Krista, I love that. I love that book. And I am literally going to put a post it on my computer with the words go forward on it as a daily reminder. So thank you so much. Krista, thanks so much for sharing this process with us. This has been so helpful to me, and I know that it will be helpful to so many people listening. If you are listening and are a mentee who identifies as being an introvert, I recommend that you share this podcast with your mentor so they can support you in learning to take the small steps to speak up more. They can be the person that you debrief with on how it felt and what are some of the things that you've noticed. Before we go, I'd like to just do a quick recap of the 5 steps that Krista has developed. Step one, if you are mentoring someone who is introverted, first of all, acknowledge the person's strengths, acknowledge that it's hard to be an introverted in such an extroverted world and, build trust and confidence. Step two is to figure out why it's important to speak up. If you don't have a why, you're not going to do it. I loved Krista's why of you don't want to contribute to unconscious bias. Step three is come up with actions to do in the next 1 to 2 weeks based on your whys. Remember to start small and to use starter scripts. Step four, put the steps into action on bigger things that align with your goals and notice how it feels to take these actions. Also, notice the reactions you get from others. And then step five is reflect on how it went with someone else, if possible, a mentor, a colleague, a friend. And then after reflection, plan for the next specific setting and do the next thing. And as Krista said, rinse and repeat. Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Mentio Matters podcast. We look forward to having you join us again next time.